to welcome Daisy Dowling. Daisy is the founder and CEO of Workparent, the leading provider of coaching and professional development services for working parents and the organizations that employ them. She is also the author of Workparent, the complete guide to succeeding on the job, staying true to yourself, and raising happy kids. Before founding Workparent in 2016, Daisy served as managing director and global head of talent development for Blackstone, the world's largest alternative asset management firm. She was also principal of Kitty & Partners, a global leadership development and business psychology advisor, and vice president of the Pine Street Senior Leadership Development Team at Goldman Sachs. Welcome, Daisy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be with you.
Oh my gosh, what a resume too. I'm so impressed. I mean, and you're a great work parent. So you got the work part down
Well,
and the working parent component.
What the resume might not capture, though, is the huge pile of laundry that's just outside the camera angle next to me that I can't seem to make a dent in. So we're all a little bit different than how we might appear on paper.
And I think that is the one part about transparency. There's lots of good things about transparency, but I like that. And I like the authenticity. A lot more people are feeling comfortable now to kind of let real life show through. And I think it's a much more attainable goal because I have stuff in the dryer.
We all do.
Well, Daisy, your mission is to empower and equip working mothers and fathers to lead successful, satisfying, and sustainable lives. How did this come to be your focus?
So I wish I had a really romantic origin story, but the simple answer is it came to be my focus because of real necessity. So I worked for many, many years inside large corporations as an executive coach and leadership development professional. And even before I became a parent myself, it always really nagged at me that I could give people career or workplace advice, but I couldn't really give them anything tangible or useful on how to combine that career success and on-the-job success with what they wanted to do outside of work, which was be present and loving parents for so many of them. So I felt like I was a doctor treating half the body and not really making an impact. And then you can see where this movie is going, of course. When I became a parent myself 10 years ago, I said, here I am, the executive coach. I should know how to transition onto leave and then come back and how to manage my calendar and how to get dinner on the table after a very long day at work and how to handle business travel. And I didn't know how to do any of those things. And so I one day pushed my then 2 or 3 month old daughter down to the Barnes and Noble in our neighborhood in New York City. And I asked the local clerk, at that store, where is the working parent book? And he said, well, here's the career section and there's the parenting section. And there didn't seem to be anything that really sat at the nexus of those two. And so I decided to make it my personal mission at first. It was just sort of a side project and interest. And obviously it's blossomed into something much more and is now my full-time work. But to figure out what are the best pieces of advice, what are the little nuggets of information that we all need to have as working parents, what perspective can help us. And I've gotten that basically from other working parents. So in the past many years now, I've interviewed hundreds of parents in different fields and family structures and phases of parenting as to what works. And that's what I bring to my clients. And that's what's in the book. And honestly, I'm doing all of this because it helps me too, as the parent of now 2 kids.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, I love that kind of personal story because it enables you to understand what your clients are going through because you've been there. And then to have all that great advice from people who are doing it well, that's the hardest part, right? People need to know how to figure this out, and we don't all have time to kind of reinvent the wheel. So that's awesome. And the book is extremely comprehensive. I love it. It's almost like the Bible for work parenting in terms of the comprehensiveness of it.
Yeah, I wanted to write something that I really needed to read. So that's what I tried to do.
I love it, and making that combination. So you do say it's possible to succeed on the job, stay true to yourself, and raise happy kids. It's a yes and. So what are the keys to really doing this that you learned?
I think the first and most important thing that every working parent, whether you've got a newborn or you're thinking about becoming a parent or you have a 17-year-old, whatever it is, the first thing that you need to do is to step back and take a good look at and really start controlling what I call your working parent template. So many or most of us really go through working parenthood and this sort of ongoing spin cycle that we're in of trying to manage work and family and get a little bit of time for ourselves. And we're always trying to sort of manage towards those shoulds. I should be home for dinner. I should be able to deliver a really great presentation tomorrow. I should be able to make it to every one of my kids' soccer games, et cetera. It feels like we're serving sort of we're serving a set of criteria that we haven't necessarily consciously set out ourselves. So your working parent template is just your mental model of how working parenthood works. And what a lot of us have done is created that template, sort of like a collage-like picture in our minds of what it means to be a good working parent based on different experiences and observations and bits of advice that we've picked up over the course of our lives. And we have it in our heads that, well, gee, since, my mom, who worked as a teacher, was able to cook dinner for me and my sister every night growing up, I have it in my head that I should be cooking dinner every single night for my kids now too. Well, that's part of my template, but is that realistic? And is that part of the model that I want to have for my working parenthood? Given the hours, given how I work, given how I travel, given the fact that I don't love cooking every single night, honestly, that shouldn't be part of my template, or it might not be realistic. So I recommend that all of my coaching clients take just a couple of hours by themselves, with a friend, with a partner, and just take the time to jot out on a piece of paper what they've observed from their family of origin, early career mentors, from the contacts they have on social media about what good working parenthood really looks like. And then once that's down on paper, take a step back and say, but how does this map to my life? Maybe you're not going to be doing a lot of cooking. Maybe it's okay for you to be working very long hours during the week. Maybe you have certain income needs. As soon as you start setting the parameters of success, it allows you to take control, gain more confidence, and combine these three things: work, family, and yourself in the way that you want to, as opposed to just managing towards other people's criteria.
Yeah, or some unrealistic standard
Exactly.
that maybe doesn't work. So are there common mistakes that you see working parents make that keep them from reaching this kind of nirvana?
Yeah. So one really common mistake, and listen, when I say mistake, I'm going to raise my hand and say guilty, number one right here. So I've made all the mistakes, and so I'm sympathetic to them, and I keep making them. And that's part of the journey of learning. But one of the really common mistakes is what I call do-it-myselfism. So by the time you become a parent, you have usually gotten to a place in your career where you've succeeded. You've gotten some important wins. And those wins have come because you're usually a really hard worker. You've taken things on, you raise your hand, you say yes, you're diligent, you're capable, you're responsible. And then all of a sudden you become a parent and you keep applying those skills to working parenthood. And to an extent, that's good. But what often or very often happens is that people don't step back and say, how do I find the network of help and support that I possibly could? How do I bring other people in instead of trying to do everything myself and just be conscientious and diligent? How can I enlist other people in my life to help back me up here? Now, Mary Poppins is not going to come land on my front lawn. As much as as I face the return to school, I desperately wish that she would. That's not going to happen. That's not realistic. But I can maybe ask a neighbor for help as my child gets off the school bus. Maybe one of the other parents in her class can meet her there if I have a conference call that's going late. Maybe, a boss or a client or somebody else in your work sphere can give you some advice or extend you some situational flexibility. Maybe the nurse practitioner at the pediatrician's office can give you advice about how to help the baby sleep through the night so you're better rested. In this way, getting these little different shreds of help and support, you can actually turn working parenthood from something that's like over the top overwhelming into merely extremely demanding. And that's a huge step forward. So don't make the mistake of thinking, I've just got to grow a spine of steel. Think about, how do I enlist the team?
I love that. And, it is about work-life fit. I like that phrase. That someone I know came up with, Kelly Yost, about this idea of finding what fits for you and your family. And you talked about it, right? Your kids could get involved in after school sports. They could be in the school play, dance recitals, and you want to be in that? Do you want to watch them practice or be the coach on the team? At the same time, you want to be, successful or at least address maybe a demanding career, right? Where you're just as needed there. So how do you suggest people balance, or what have you seen work for people to experience that joy of their children growing up, seeing them, being a part of that, how they balance that or make that fit with that demanding career?
Yeah. So one coaching technique, so I'm going to turn myself into your coach here. One coaching technique that is really helpful as you're thinking about how do I fit this all in and how do I do everything that's important is to play things forward. So today or this week, the 3 soccer practices or the, 2 games or the dinner or the client meeting or whatever, everything seems important and cramming it all in is really hard. It can be a much more helpful way to get perspective about your highest and best use, what you really want to allocate time to, and what you can give yourself a little bit of a pass on, maybe what you can de-emphasize by thinking about the picture 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So as your child grows up and, 5 years from now, is it essential that you've been at every single one of the soccer games? Or is it essential that you were at several of them, or at the championship games, or that you volunteered on a monthly basis to help coach the soccer team? In other words, by playing it forward, you imagine the ultimate impact of your actions, as opposed to just thinking about, should I do this action or not right now? That's a much more difficult way to make decisions. Again, everything looks important. Everything's yanking at you. So I would say if you're thinking about what's the fit here, how can I make it work? Just go out for a good long walk and think, when my kid is 12 or 20, what do I want the impact to look like? Where do I want to be career-wise? Maybe I can ratchet back a little bit on career travel now, for example, and still get toward my career goals. And the question of whether or not I need to fly to California next month won't feel quite as important.
Yeah, and maybe it's interesting too, because I think with work, before children, my default would be, sure, whatever work needs me to do, I'll do. But after having our son, I was like, well, I can see now. I mean, my priorities aren't quite the same. Like, I have a different level of importance that work would need to take away time from family as well. So it's really good to think through. I like that long-term perspective. So another aspect to this, Daisy, is a lot of times I have clients who are afraid to change careers to do something more enjoyable, because they'll say, well, I have family obligations, I'm a working parent. It's almost used as a reason not to do something they would enjoy doing. But I often tell them, guess what? Your kids are taking notes from you in terms of what a successful career looks like. And I know that because a lot of my clients will tell me, well, I did this career because my parents, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So what advice do you have for working parents about being true to themselves through this process as well?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would say to every working parent is it's good overall to spend a little bit more time thinking about your career instead of just about your work. So when you become a working parent, you're so busy, you got so much on, the deadline's on Thursday, the meeting's on Tuesday, the kids have to be dropped off at school, et cetera. You're thinking about just the day in, day out, the blocking and tackling of task execution, as opposed to thinking about where is this going career-wise. So if you don't already have this habit or practice, try and schedule maybe even half an hour a week. It doesn't have to be more than that, where you're updating your LinkedIn profile or posting something on LinkedIn, or whether you set aside some time for a catch-up phone call with an old mentor of yours, or to update an executive recruiter on some of your recent career accomplishments so that you're up to date and you get that first call for the plum new job. So actually allocate some time to your career, just as a general, I call it career hygiene move. The second thing to do is think about your totality of impact on your kids. So we all know what it's like to have worked a long day and be really frustrated. We've all been there, even if we're in careers we love. And we're spending time with our kids and we're frazzled and we're tired and we don't feel like we have a lot of fuel in the tank. And that comes through in terms of our parenting. So if you're kind of a little worried about, well, I have the secure job or the sure thing, and I don't want to go towards something that could be better or maybe happier for me, just think, okay, but maybe if you were in that different career, you might be able to be more secure, calm, supportive, nurturing, more of the parent that you want to be, because of the texture and because of the reality of that job. So play out the pros and cons a little bit that way. And then finally, I would say there's actually a tool for it in the book. There's a whole sort of questions to ask yourself about career changes, to challenge yourself a little bit and to think, am I doing this or not doing this because I'm afraid, because I want to move towards something, because I want to move away from something? What are the realistic trade-offs in terms of income and so forth? And I lay that all out in the book almost as a way for people to self-tutor or self-coach through conversations that can be really complex and difficult and nonlinear, but to take yourself through that in a way that's holistic and that's complete.
Yeah, it's really smart. Great advice. I love that. And, you're not just talking about individuals, because your work also focuses on organizations, and your clients have included companies from Morgan Stanley to Chevron to the NBA to even the US Air Force and many others, and even clients across the globe, right? So it's not just in the US. So what advice do you give to leadership at these types of institutions to help them better support working parents?
So I'm so glad you asked that question, because I'm really, really passionate about this now as a one-to-one coach, but as somebody who's spent a long time in-house in companies trying to help parents also. So there's really 3 different things that organizations can do to help support, really help working parents flourish. And it's what I call the 3 Ps. There's policies, there's programs, and there's practices. Policies are things like, how long do you offer for parental leave? And programs are things like maybe a new parent mentoring program, for example. And then there's practices. So this 3rd P. And practices are the little things like how a boss reacts to the information that you're expecting, or the way in which somebody, will, talk to you if you say that you have to leave work because you've got a sudden pediatrician's appointment, or the way in which your time is collected or managed or viewed, or just even body language in a meeting, just all those small things, the kind of texture of your day-to-day that really make up the culture of the organization or the team that you're on. And I think on the back end of the pandemic, there was such a good and rightful focus on changing policies and programs and extending parental leaves. And we all need that. I'm not knocking this at all. Have devoted my career to supportive working parents. I'm so excited by it. But creating those policies and programs, and what we've given short shrift to as organizations and as organizational leaders, are some of those practices. So the next time as a boss, let's say you have a Zoom with somebody on your team, if you're working remote, make certain that there's a picture of your kids or your dog or something that's important to you in the background of the Zoom, right? Don't just have it look like a pure play professional backdrop. It's small things like that you think, well, that's kind of a throwaway. But it sends an important message that I'm okay with this and you should be okay with it too. That it's all right for you to talk to me about this, that I'm sending that small signal of support. And it's not those practices aren't going to substitute for all the policies and programs, but they're that 3rd essential leg of the stool. And if we can nail all 3, if we can get all 3 right, that's when we're going to see the serious lift. And when organizations are going to start to really feel working parent friendly.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, they will retain those working parents, because exactly that texture component is what I hear from my working parent clients who aren't happy. They'll notice,
Exactly.
that leader didn't acknowledge, or they'll notice the positive. Yeah, I did see a picture of their family in their Zoom background. That really made me feel better.
Exactly.
So these things go a long way. And I love your background, by the way.
Thank you.
You're walking the talk.
I have some outdated pictures, but I can't get rid of them because they're some of my favorite pictures of my kids when they were really small.
Right. And your kid's 25. You're like, Mom, can you really take down that
I know.
baby photo? No, I can't.
Not quite that old. Still under 10.
No, I know,
yes.
right? So, that leads us to my last question. So, as a proud working parent yourself, you and your working dad husband have 2 young children. Can you share a personal success story of where you've been able to take your own advice?
Yeah. So one of the favorite chapters I have in the book is about time off. And one of the very first coaching questions I ask all my new clients is, when's the last time you had a day off? And a lot of times I get sort of a stunned or guilty look, or people start sort of saying, well, you mean a whole day or whatever. And so time off, break time, downtime, time to recharge your battery is so essential. There is no Olympic athlete who got to the games or who medals because they exercise 24 hours a day, right? Rest is part of their training regimen. So, working parent time off is all kinds of important. Now, I say that, but particularly during the pandemic, as I had children distance learning for many, many months, and as I was building this business and finishing my book manuscript, the time off thing kind of totally went out the window. And to be really honest here, I found myself pretty ground down and pretty fried, pretty crispy. If we talk about burnout, I was on the edge there. And so I went back and I actually had to sort of give myself some feedback, and my husband gave me some feedback too, and say, what's going to work for me? And I went back to a technique that has worked for me before, which is setting aside Saturdays. That day doesn't have particular significance for me beyond that it's a weekend day, and it's generally easier for me to sort of take some break time. To take Saturdays is what I call my off day or my Sabbath day. And I mean that in a non-religious sense, although for others, they can, use it religiously. But to take that day and say, I might read my emails, but I'm not going to respond to any of them. I'm not going to do anything that I don't have to do that's considered productive. I'm just going to set aside time for things that I find pleasurable, relaxing, rewarding, whether that's, making cookies with my kids or going out for a walk or seeing a friend or whatever. And I'm not going to feel guilty about that time. And because it's regular, because it's once a week, it's just enough to give me that sense of sustenance on a regular basis. Now, I need to do a better job of, baking some of that downtime into the rest part of my week. But that has been something that's been really, really powerful for me. And I think some version of that can work for a lot of different parents, whatever format you decide to use it in.
Yeah. And it sounds like one of those things that could, in a good way, really snowball, because for clients that I've had who have done the work parenting thing well, when they take time for themselves that way or set those healthy boundaries, and then they're able to be with their families, they come back to work with so much more energy and such better productivity. That I think that's the one other trend. Oh, and I do have one quick question about trends you're seeing. But I think one thing with the pandemic, when we didn't have a lot else to do but work and parent, people got used to spending a whole lot of time at work. And time isn't necessarily, I always learned the principle of work expands to fill the time. So it is good to take that time for yourself. I guess that is one more question is, are you seeing any trends we should be aware of that we haven't touched on today?
I think that the trend, such as it is, so here we are in August, getting toward the end of August of 2022. The trend that I'm seeing, or what I'm hearing in the field, is that people are really seeing this fall, September, the return to school, whether or not you have school-aged children, but just this fall, as being a point of tremendous reset. So maybe you went through the pandemic working remote. Now you're going back. Maybe the kids are back in school. Whatever the actual practical changes are, I think people are really looking for some new techniques and some new ways to bring these three things together: work, parenting, and self. So I use that as a way to encourage any leaders or managers who are thinking about this as a way to communicate with their teams and to say, how are we going to approach this? Maybe there's some pivots we need to make as we move into fall, as we move into the backstretch of this year. And for each of us ourselves to think about 2 or maybe 3 different techniques. Maybe we get a little bit of extra help and support. Maybe we start pushing back instead of defaulting to yes all the time at work. Maybe we use no as a more common answer. Maybe it's setting up a once a week, family dinner that you hold as really, really important to your family because everybody's going and coming during the week. Whatever those things are, be deliberate, be intentional, and think about the habits that you want to start now, that you want to continue into 2023, and then through the rest of your working parenthood.
Wow. Daisy, great advice. You're inspiring me, even though we already did start school where I am.
Oh, you're in the thick of it then.
Yeah. Well, it's okay though. It's like you said, there's always opportunity for change and always opportunity for, having more of what you want out of life. And you really gave fantastic advice. Thank you so much for your time. What's the best way for people to reach you or find out more about you?
You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can go to www.workparent.com, look at different articles and things that I've published that are available for free. You can grab a copy of my book on Amazon, or you can sign up for my free coaching newsletter, which is also on my website.
Fantastic. Well, I know I'll be signing up. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
It was great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.